Well, welcome back, guys, to Teen K number 6. And, this is kind of, we've kind of had to swap up our production schedule quite a bit because now we're back to real life, kind of.
Yeah.
I mean by kind of, I mean now there's actually people here that's not the staff. And so that's been quite a change to how we do things, changed up my work schedule a little bit.
We're going on trips now, stuff
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
So, so sorry about Bible study is on the way right now. This is being recorded, and
It's not being recorded right now. It's being edited right now. We're not doing both in the same. So,
So today's topic is kind of something that is addressed in the church, I'd say, but I think it's addressed in the wrong circumstances because today's topic is fear and anxiety, and I'll let you continue on a thought I know you have.
So, y'all don't know this. We were just recording a few seconds ago, and I'm busting you out, bro.
I was hoping you wouldn't mention this.
We were just recording a few seconds ago, and I looked over, and there's no green light on his mic. So this is take 2 of our podcast. Good thing we were only like 30 seconds into it. But anyway, so
I was hoping you wouldn't mention that.
Oh, I'm busting you out, bro. You can bust me out sometime when I do something dumb.
Oh, don't worry, I will.
It happens quite often. So the but with fear and anxiety, it was like so many things else that the church does. We didn't address it. And COVID hit, and it was like everybody taught on fear and anxiety for like 2 weeks.
I remember. I forgot where it was. I can't remember if it was like, it was on Right Now Media. They had like 5 different brands.
Yes.
They're new, where they have like the new feed tab, that tab. Well, that was all it had was like what to do in COVID-19.
Yes,
what does
it was
Bible
all
say about
just
anxiety,
fear, and then it was like the church is like playing catch up. I had a professor in seminary. He told us, he said, guys, preach through books of the Bible, preach through verse by verses. He said, because what that's going to do is that's going to make you teach on topics that you normally wouldn't teach on. And so when these things happen, it's not like, oh my goodness, like let's just, go over here. It's like, well, if you've been teaching all this, then you're good, right? And not to say that pastors and churches and all that are doing a bad job. It's just that's why it's so important to read all of Scripture, to study all of Scripture, even the ones we don't like. Because let's go ahead and be honest, we don't like to study fear and anxiety because it makes us look in the mirror and look at what we're doing wrong or right or whatever. And so we have to, but that's why we need to study these things and study this, is because so that way when it happens, we're not going into emergency scramble mode, but that we're just going, hey, you know what? We've already been there. We've already studied this. This is what Scripture says, and here's where we're going with it. And we just continue on.
And I have a couple of objectives, I'd say, before I want us to cover, to have a really well-rounded discussion. And the first thing is, I want us to define what exactly we're talking about very, very narrowly, very well. Next thing I want to do is explain why fear and anxiety is a bad thing. I really want to address that question. And then the last thing I really want us to cover before we end this is, what do we do about it?
Yeah.
Because like when we saw what fear and anxiety does, I think we all can think about it. I don't think we should spend much time on it. But, fear and anxiety caused every store to run out of toilet paper for a solid 3-4 weeks.
I think it was longer than that. It was getting a little sketchy there for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's the meat shortage and the pork shortage. And I don't know. There's a new shortage out right now. I don't know what it is.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
I think we all can know what's going on and understand and can relate to what it is, even if it's on a personal level. Like, I want to begin defining it. And I think fear and anxiety is, and worrying, for example, I think that is concern taken way too far.
Yeah.
Because it's perfectly healthy to have concern for something. Like, I have a big test coming up, okay? Well, I need to, and that concern that I might not do well if I don't study is a healthy thing because it makes me realize, wait, I got to do something about this. That concern causes me to act.
Yeah.
And it causes me to act to do something healthy, such as study.
Yeah.
Well, concern can go too far if it's unchecked.
to be so afraid that you're going to fail that test that you're not only going to study, but then you're going to write the answers on your arm.
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden you went too far, right?
You know, you've gone way too far.
Yeah.
Or it could cause you to forget about other things. Like, I studied so much, I really didn't care about my social life anymore, and that hurt me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Or I've seen people, like, study without eating, like, for so long. You're like,
Yeah.
they're so busy studying. Like, I had a friend, I literally had to drag him to the cafeteria.
Yeah.
During his first round of finals at college. Dude,
Yep.
I basically was like, dude, you got to go to the cafeteria, man. Like, eat something.
Yeah.
I had a friend when I was in high school. A dear family member to her got super sick and was in the hospital. And, of course, that's a very worrying situation.
Yeah.
And I've got, concern because what was to happen to this family member? He almost died.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thing is, she went like a day or two without eating.
Yeah.
Like, and then when she ate like a ham sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
Like, obviously, that's concern that caused her to that put her into action to do one of the worst things for her health.
Yeah. And it's so, see, worry is so weird because we worry about so many different aspects. We worry about our social, we worry about family, we worry about our lifestyles. But then also there's the worry about spiritual issues. I was talking to someone this week, and they had just gotten off a phone call with a friend who had started to worry about salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy was like, dude, here is a pastor. This guy was a pastor. It was a pastor of another church. I don't even know where the guy is. But, here he is. And the guy was like, I truly believe my friend is saved, but Satan has just crept into his mind and put this worry into him. And worry has this way of just almost crippling you.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I had a professor in seminary. He told about, he was like 40, and he had a son who was like, I don't know, 10, 12, something like that. And he was just sitting there. He walked past his room, and the son was just sitting there and just frozen. And he goes, dads can tell whenever something's not right. And he goes, son, what's going on? And he goes, Dad, I just have so much to do. I just don't know where to start.
Mm-hmm.
And he just was overwhelmed, and he was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, I have so much schoolwork, I can't move. He's like, I'm terrified. I'm worried to death. And so instead of just jumping in and starting to do work and scrambling through it, he had gotten to the point where he just froze and just wouldn't do anything. And the dad was like, okay, like, let's sit down. Like, what's the easiest thing you have to do? Well, it's this homework. Okay, well, let's start on that. And so they did one and, got that ball rolling of doing some work and getting the homework done. Okay, and moving past that. And fear and anxiety, it can drive us to do unhealthy things, to do a ton of work and all that, or it can stop us. It just stops us in our track. And I think that's what happens more times than not spiritually, is that Satan just goes into our life, attacks us with worry and doubt and all that, and then we just freeze.
All right.
And we just go, I don't know where to go with this. And a great example of that is witnessing to people.
Oh,
like
you're about to hit something.
I'm terrified they're going to reject me. By the way,
Uh-huh.
they're not rejecting you; they're rejecting Jesus.
Yeah.
Don't put yourself in that role. But I'm terrified they're going to say no, so I'm just not going to.
Yeah.
And I had Dr. Gray. I've mentioned him a lot. Dr. Gray looked at us one time and he said, guys, if they reject you, they're going to go to hell. But if you do nothing, they're going to go to hell anyway. He goes, it's not like, if they reject me, then they're going to hell, and they're going to go to hell. But they wasn't going to go before. He's like, so if they reject you or you mess it up, he said, they're no worse off than what they were before you started.
Yeah.
So why are you worried about it? And we were just like, okay, like they can only go up, right? It's like, you can't get any worse. So why are you worried about failing?
Yeah.
And so, so that's just one way of just Satan just crippling us with fear and anxiety is just, it stops our spiritual walk. In so many different ways, and we just freeze and just go, you know what? I'm not going to do it.
So let's say I'd say, since we're both spiritual, leaders, how would you diagnose anxiety or like fear problem? Like, what do you think are the symptoms of people who have this problem? And I'm not saying, like anxiety disorder, like, like your
Yeah.
psychiatrist, you're not. But how would you like, what are the symptoms of fear and anxiety affecting our spiritual lives and our even our mental or physical health? I know that's a big question, but I think the
Yeah.
first thing is it causes us to begin doubting.
Yeah.
I think that's the first place that fear and anxiety strike is doubt department.
Um, I'm going back and forth in my mind to
Yeah.
tell this story or not. Um, there was a lady, and no one knows who she is, but whenever I counsel with people, I don't
Yeah.
you know disclose any of that, and so I'm not going to disclose a whole lot. But this lady had a fear and a doubt of did she make the right decision,
Mhm.
and it was one of those decisions. We'll never know if she made the right decision or wrong
Yeah.
decision. Um, but it crippled her life to the point that that decision had been made. It was two decisions. One was made almost 10 years ago, and one was made about 5 or 6 years ago. And this is from the time I was counseling with her, and this was years ago that I was
Mhm.
counseling with her. And she had, so I mean, it's been almost probably close to 15 years ago now. And she just she couldn't move on with her life
Yeah.
to the point that her children were going to her going, "Mom, something has to change in your life."
Mhm.
Her kids were like 10.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like her kids were like 17, 18 going, "Mom, there's something not right with you. You need help." It was like a 10-year-old could see something was not right with her
Mhm.
mother. And so, um, you know, but that's what fear and anxiety is. Just to me, that's like the first tell sign of anxiety and fear is just the either the unrational movement or the lack of movement altogether.
Yeah.
They're either running 90 miles an hour and just going and
Mhm.
not thinking, or they're just like frozen and just going, "I'm just not going to do anything ever again."
Yeah.
You know, like the unhealthy version of just going and doing stuff is all the people hoarding up the toilet paper.
Yeah.
They just went and got it. They didn't even think about,
Mhm.
hey, I don't need a 50 million sheets of toilet paper.
Yeah.
Like, they just went and bought it.
Mhm.
But then there was other people who were so terrified they didn't go to the store and buy any toilet paper,
Mhm.
and then they ran out, and it was like, what do we do now?
No, that's something I've never really heard of. Was like people who've come out and said, "Yeah, I ran out."
Yeah. There was one point we were sitting there going, "Oh, we're getting a little low.
Yeah.
We might want to." And it wasn't that we just were crippled with fear. It was just like, oh, whenever all this first started, we thought, oh, it'll be 3 weeks and we'll be done.
Mhm.
Like, we got enough to last us a month. We just went to Sam's.
Yeah.
Like, we got a big package, and then it was like, oh, this is going to last a little bit longer than I thought.
Mhm.
Might need to try to find some toilet paper.
And I'm going to confess something, and thank goodness I know my parents don't watch this.
Oh, that's cold.
I'm pretty sure. Well, I'm pretty sure they don't. I'm probably about to get corrected.
If they do, they're gonna call you out.
15
I hope
minutes
they
after I
do.
upload this video, I'm probably gonna get a phone call from my mom.
How
But
dare you, Kirkland?
anyway, it got to the point where my parents use a lot of toilet paper, like unnecessarily large amounts, and it's so bad. So a few like back in November, my grandma gave me like a college care package. It had like it was like this tub, and it had like like it had like chips and drinks, stuff that
Yeah.
she knew I liked. And it was just her being like, "Hey, happy first semester of college," and in it was like an 8 pack of toilet paper, and it was actually pretty good toilet paper.
Mm-hmm.
And at the beginning of the semester, I got this like in November. But beginning semester, all my suite mates and we all just bought a bunch of toilet paper.
Yeah.
And we've been living on, and it honestly lasted us like the whole school year, which is awesome.
Well,
So
your school year got cut short, so
yeah.
yeah.
Well, so I had this 8 pack of toilet paper, and it was good stuff. And I never touched it, and so I moved back to home in March, and I realized my parents are going through toilet paper like crazy, and so I kind of had my secret stash, and like,
He's hoarding the toilet paper over there.
well, it was my toilet paper that my grandmother gave me.
Precious, my precious.
So like every time I had to use the bathroom, I would grab my roll.
He would tuck it underneath his shirt.
Yeah, I would walk. Well, thankfully my room is next to the bathroom that I use to go number 2 in. So I would grab the toilet paper, walk in real quickly, and do my business, wipe, flush it all down, and I'd walk back and hide it back in my room. And I still go, and for reference, I'm still going strong on toilet paper. That 8-pack is still lasting me. It's like July. Obviously, toilet paper supplies are back to normal, and like I'm using my parents. I still have that 8-pack.
Oh, fear and anxiety. And we're
But
talking about toilet
basically,
paper.
I
This is a bunch of youth
I'm
pastors
going
getting together.
Yeah, I'm going to confess I'm a toilet paper hoarder.
Oh,
Only under the
no.
circumstance I'm with people who cannot ration in the least bit or like be conservative.
He's one of those guys. All right, so back to fear and
Okay,
anxiety.
so I want to
Yeah.
move on from our
Yeah.
toilet paper obsession.
Yeah.
But
Well, for our 2 listeners that are still paying attention.
yeah, and honestly, the only listeners that are still here are probably guys. Like only they probably understand.
Yeah.
But I want to move on. I want us to talk about why fear and anxiety is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like, what is the Bible like? We've said it's made people do such crazy stuff. Like rationally and morally, that in itself, the evidence that we just gave would be a very worldly way to say yes. Fear and anxiety is a bad thing, and there's lots of studies out there about what prolonged anxiety does to like the body, the mind, and all that stuff. But what does the Bible say? What does Jesus? This is something that Jesus hit on hard in the middle of Matthew. I can think of like a straight chapter of where he tackles this subject.
Yeah.
And I wish I knew. I'm around Matthew 15, probably a little bit after, if I remember correctly.
And didn't it? I didn't look it up. I just thought of this. Didn't it say like 365 times in the Bible it says "fear not"?
Yeah.
I think it's like one for every day of the year.
Yeah.
Like it says "fear not."
Mm-hmm.
Like don't be afraid. And we see that with, and this is why with angels. I don't want to get into the whole angels discussion. But we have a really bad view of angels because every time we see angels in the Bible, people are terrified.
Yeah.
And the first thing they say is fear not. Don't be afraid. Hold up. Like, chill out. Like, it's okay. I'm not here to hurt you. And so we have this unrealistic fear. And so it says throughout the entire Bible, just fear not. Don't be afraid. Jesus is often saying that of just, look, don't worry. And I think that's a great example whenever the men are coming to him and it's like, hey, look, let me go tell my family goodbye. Let me go and bury my dad.
Yeah.
And he's just like, hold it. And, and he, at one point he even says, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head.
Yeah.
Okay. He's like, look, the Son of Man, he's not committed to a household on this earth.
Yeah.
Jesus was not committed. We as Christians should not worry about, the house and stuff like that, and trust that Jesus is in control of that.
Yeah.
That, we go where he leads. And that's one thing that's really hard to get people to understand as a pastor.
Yeah.
Like whenever I was at a church in Damascus, and while I was going to college, and to get people to understand why I would ever pack up my family, because at the time we were living in Greenbrier, which is like, I think we were like 15 minutes away from my in-laws. Like we were very close.
Yeah.
Living very close to them. And to get people to understand why in the world would you pack up your family who is living so close to family, all that, and move to Memphis, one of the most dangerous cities in the world. Why would you do that? And it was like, because God called me to. And people just could not seem to grasp their minds around, as preachers, we're called to go where God tells us to go.
Yeah.
And so it's so hard for people to see that, of just, the willingness to say, you know what, like, God, I am going to live where you tell me to live.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying, hey, you know what, there's a job here, so I'm going to move over here. It's just like, hey, God, I'm going to be here until you tell me to move.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was decisions like, I mean, I've made, people were like, that makes no sense. Why would you do that? And it's like, well, because God told me to. Well, that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's like, not really. Like, but, like even coming here, everyone was like, dude, you're a youth pastor and you're going to be a middle school pastor. That almost looks like a step down. I'm like, no, not really, because God called me to do it.
Yeah.
Well, why? I don't know. He just told me to do it. So I said, okay, God. Like,
like who are you going to argue with?
Yeah.
Like, it's like in Job, like, where were you when I created the world?
Yes. And so we have to just understand that sometimes that step of faith, and I think that's one big reason for anxiety, is Satan is trying to get us to where we're not willing to take that step.
Ooh.
Just of, oh man, like, because great example, I had a guy come up to me whenever I was moving to Memphis.
Yeah.
And was like, hey man, Memphis is the second most dangerous place in America. Second most dangerous city in America.
Yeah.
And at the time it was.
Mm-hmm.
Detroit was number 1 and Memphis was number 2.
Yeah.
Okay, now I think it's Chicago number 1.
Passed by Little Rock, Arkansas, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how we do it.
So everyone was, and I was like, oh man, they were like, you mean to tell me you're going to move your newlywed wife to Memphis, the second most dangerous city in America? And I'm like, man, man, am I being a bad husband? And so I went to my father-in-law, and because I was like, if anybody's going to tell me to stay, it's going to be him, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, am I being a bad husband? And he looked at me just dead serious. I'll never forget it. He goes, Tyler, he said, you know where the most dangerous place in the world is?
What?
And I wanted to say Detroit, because I was like, hey, it's number 1. I know that. I did the research.
Be a bad issue.
Yeah.
Be a bad answer.
He goes, I said Detroit, and he said, dude, it's out of the will of God. He said, I would much rather you live in Memphis and be in the will of God than to live in my own house and be out of the will of God.
Yeah.
He said, you need to be in the will of God, so take that step of faith. And I was just like, dude, if he's okay with it, like, I need to be too. And so that was, just that, I guess, a freedom almost of just, man, like, as long as I'm following the will of God, I'm safe.
Yeah.
And we see that throughout the New Testament with the first century church. Like, they beat them.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, hey, you do it again, we're going to kill you. They didn't have this fear of going, oh, my goodness, I'm going to, clam up and I'm going to be careful to say the right things, because if I say one wrong thing, they're going to kill me. They walked out rejoicing from the laughing, like, dude, look at my spine.
Yeah.
Like, that was awesome. I was counted worthy to suffer with the cause of Christ.
Yeah.
And so they didn't have that fear.
And I want to confront, like, a misunderstood thing is that anxiety and, like, worry is portrayed as this innocent little thing that we just do by ourselves and, like, at home, but when we get to the church, it's all good,
Yeah.
But here's the thing, anxiety and worrying, that's a sin.
Yeah.
And I know I'm going to sound a little harsh when I say this, but it's the sin of the garden. Because what anxiety and worrying excessively causes you to do is it causes you to take a situation out of God's hands, causes you to, and it puts it in your own, you put it in your own lap, and you act on your own will.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing, God says, come to me all who are weary, and I will give you rest. And that's not us laying our lives in God's hand. That's us taking control into our own hands.
Yeah.
And any time we fall out of the will of God, that is sin. That's what the definition of sin is. Sin is separation from God.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we willingly take ourselves out of a situation or throw ourselves into a situation because of our worries, well, that's sinning.
Yeah.
And I don't want us to, like, put on some back burner as some, like, little thing that we don't address only when it's convenient. But no, it's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's an issue as much as homosexuality in the church. It's an issue as much as pride and all those other things.
Yep. And so, give you a great example of trying to, hold on to the control. I knew a man who um, he would not let anyone drive
Mhm.
ever. Okay, we would go on trips, and he would either drive the bus himself or he would drive his own vehicle.
Yeah.
He would never ride in the vehicle with anybody else driving,
Yeah.
not even his wife. Okay, and so we were planning a mission trip, and he wouldn't go
Mhm.
because he knew that mission trip was like I don't know, it's like 24 hour drive.
Yeah.
And he knew he couldn't drive it all himself.
Mhm.
And he wouldn't ride with somebody he wouldn't ride with anybody.
Mhm.
He had to drive it. So he just didn't go.
Mhm.
There's a great example right there of someone who is their spiritual walk is being controlled by their own fear. Is it a rational fear that you won't ride in the vehicle with somebody else? Like, absolutely not.
Like, it's okay to be concerned. Like, okay, maybe this guy's not as good as a driver as me, but
yeah,
when God anoints someone to drive a vehicle, and that's as much serving as
Yeah.
handing food to starving children. Obviously, it's a drastic,
Yeah.
comparison, but you have to trust God with everything, and there's kind of a realization I don't think many people, it doesn't sink in at first when it comes to their walk with God. But when you give your life to Christ, the life that you now live is not your own.
Yeah.
Like, that's the first thing, is that the first thing about all of this is for us believing Christians, born again believers, is that we don't own our own lives. It's kind of like if I sold you my car,
Mm-hmm.
would I be in the right to be like, hey, Tyler, have you changed the oil? It's been like 3,000 miles. You got to change the oil, man.
Yeah.
Or if I was on top, or if I got onto you for not keeping the car clean.
Yeah.
Well, here's the problem. That's not my car anymore. I sold it to you.
Yeah. I can do whatever I want to it.
Yeah.
I can go take a baseball bat to it. And
Yeah.
you'd be like, hey, that was really dumb of you, but you ultimately have no rights to it. And that's where I think as Christians, we need to be careful that we don't get caught into that trap of this fear and anxiety because how much it affects our Christian walk.
It does.
And I think it affects it without us even knowing it.
Mhm.
Like, it just happens, and then we just look around and we go, oh my goodness, 3 months have passed.
Yeah.
What am I doing?
Mhm. I have a friend from college. He graduated. He moved back with his parents, but this whole COVID thing has and this guy's a ministry major, and he should be like, getting ready for seminary, or he wants to be, he really wants to work at a church. He really wants to, follow
Mhm.
God, the call in his life. He sat in his room and played guitar for 3 months because he's so worried.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know that this pandemic thing has been like nothing else, and hopefully will be like nothing else we go through. But something I remember thinking at the beginning of this is God's doing this for a reason.
Yeah. Oh, nothing happens without God's knowing. I
Yeah.
mean, he's doing it for a reason. Now, do we know what the reason is? Probably not.
Mhm.
We have guesses.
And something of reassurance to us believers, and even if you don't believe, or if you're saved, here's something that Job really hits hard on, is that the last few chapters address this subject really hard, is God's view of justice and how he orchestrates justice. You see, Job was in a very bad situation.
Yeah.
I think we can all relate to it to an extent.
We can all relate to it, but at the same time,
We
none
can
of us
relate-
have ever been to something as severe as Job.
We can relate to that. We were having a bad day. We all have our bad
Yeah.
days.
It's like whenever I think I'm like, man, I'm having a bad day. But my 12 children did not die all at once. And I did not lose all my money. And I don't have boils all over my body.
Mhm.
I just spilled my coffee. Like, who am I to complain? But yes, yeah.
So, justice isn't this thing to where we like to think of justice as someone does wrong. It's something's done to correct that wrong. A guy robs a bank. Well, that guy
Mhm.
gets thrown in jail for however long it's appropriate. Well, justice and how God orchestrates the world isn't that simple.
Mhm.
Because at the very end of Job, God is responding to all these comments and complaints towards God that Job makes. And one of the first ones that I remember off the top of my head is, who are you? Who were you? Where were you when I created the world? When I told the stars to form? When I told the sun to rise
I
every
love it when he
morning?
says, "When I told the oceans you were not to go any further than this."
Yes.
I'm like, ooh, that just sounds pretty because I like the ocean.
Yeah.
So
So, and us human, it's kind of like a 2D object, a 2D individual trying to understand a 3D object. Because let's say you are a cartoon character on a piece of paper, and all you can see is in 2D. You know, you can see what's below you and what's beside you. Well, what happens if a 3D object starts interacting with you? Suddenly it's there, but it's not. It's phasing in and out. It has this weird thing called rotation to it. I mean, and that's us trying to understand God, wrap our hands around God, is that we can't see the whole picture at once.
yeah.
And so we're trying to, us finite beings are trying to understand an infinite God, an infinite being. And so what's our response to that? Worry. Well, is God going to take care of my children? But is he also going to take care of my finances? Is he going to take care of my work life, you know? But here's the thing. God orchestrated the whole universe. I mean, take 5 minutes to study astronomy, and you'll see how vast and how complicated our universe is.
Yeah.
And the Bible says it's all in his hands. And to me, you know, when I finished the book of Job the other day, I was doing a quick study through it, you know, and all I felt was this supernatural peace. Because I serve a God who orchestrated the entire universe just because he wanted to.
And I think it's so neat to see. I love looking at like beautiful pictures of like sunsets. And, you know, I mentioned the beach. I love the beach and the mountains and all these beautiful things that God created, man. One day I hope to go to like Cancun or the Bahamas or something like that. I mean, you know, those beautiful, just clear blue water, um, beautiful sandy beaches, all that. And yet, he calls us his crown jewel. Like, he created all of this. So remember, like, think about this. Next time y'all see a beautiful sunset or something like that, that's not God's crown jewel. That's not his best creation. His best creation was you and I. We are his best creation, and he takes the most pleasure in us. He created us in his image. And so whenever we have this idea of worry, it's like, does God really love me enough? Or, you know, to take care of me or to take care of whatever. And it's like, we're his crown jewel. We were the best of his creation. You don't think he would take care of the best?
Yeah.
Like, he's going to take care of us. We have to be okay with that.
No, we talked about this passage right before we started, but Jesus mentioned, you know, look at the birds of the air. Does your Father in heaven not feed them? Does he not give them a place to lay their heads at night? And how much more will he take care of you? Look at the flowers of this field.
Yeah.
I mean, how much, you know, God creates a sun that nourishes them every morning, every day, and then he creates dew of the night that nourishes them every evening. How much more will the Father not take care of us, his crown jewel? And then the last really major scripture that I can think of is Romans 8. And what then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who shall be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? And then it goes on for a little bit longer, and it says, oh yeah, I'm remembering now. Okay. Dang it.
You just lost it.
Yeah.
'Cause you were doing so good. It sounded so pretty.
But the last part of that section of the verse of chapter 8, not the very end of chapter 8, but one of the last sections of it says, oh yeah, who shall bring any charges against God's elect? It is Christ is the one who died. And more than that, who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, who is indeed interceding for us.
Yeah.
And that's honestly one of the things that Jesus is called when he's prophesied about in the Old Testament is the interceder.
Yeah.
The one who goes between all creation and us and is like, this is my child.
Mm-hmm. I like in um, the book of Philippians, Paul writes, "For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain."
Mm-hmm.
And for people who have this fear and anxiety, it's like they can't say that.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, Philippians, is it 1:21 where he says, "For me to live is Christ and to die
Yes.
is gain." Okay, so Philippians 2:21, and I think we've talked about this.
You've mentioned this to me.
It says, "For everyone seeks their own interest, not the interest of Christ." And I think whenever we get into this fear and anxiety, we become a Philippians 2:21,
Yes.
not a 1:21. And it's amazing what one chapter,
Yeah.
the change in that. One group is, "For me to live is Christ and to die is gain." And I'm not going to be dumb and run out there and, lick a doorknob, with the coronavirus going around.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to, live my life and trust that God is sovereign over all.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's going to be those people who are just going to be crippled by the fear, and they're going to seek their own interest. Oh man, I want to live forever. I want to live to 120, and look, I want to do that too.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's not what God's called me to do, I have to be okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, you know what, man, for me to live as Christ, I'm going to go throughout my life. I'm going to go hard for Christ. And then when he calls me home, whenever that may be, whether that's whenever tomorrow or 100 years from now, he's going to call me home and I'm going to be with Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So where's the bad? Just go hard for Christ, and keep moving, keep pushing into Christ, keep walking, keep confessing, and just keep going. Because a lot of times our fear and anxiety are about things that haven't even happened yet.
Oh, yeah.
I was stuck in that last night. I was sitting there in my mind going through all these scenarios, and I remember stopping and going, this hasn't even happened.
Yeah.
I'm totally overreacting for something that's probably not even going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just like, man, what is my deal?
I find myself doing that all the time. Actually, one of the hardest things I've ever admitted to myself, and I've never really told anyone this, and obviously it's perfectly fine to say this because I'm about to. But last summer, I worked in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and for a church, it was a great organization. I learned a lot. But one of the hardest pills I had to swallow last summer was this. Is about around my birthday, we did something called a poverty immersion.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, the church itself works a lot with homeless people. Like a handful of their members are homeless. When they leave church on Sunday afternoons, they really don't have anywhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so since I was working there, my boss sat me down, and me and the other interns went down one afternoon. Was like, "Okay, guys, we're out to do something that's pretty unpopular, but we work with people in this situation almost every day. So we're gonna ask that you guys prayerfully and willingly accept this challenge to do the same thing as they do." And that was to be homeless for a day or two. And all that happened. It was probably one of the funniest days of my life, honestly. But I had to admit, and afterwards, it all happened. And I was fine. We had food, a little bit of food. We had fun, and I learned a lot. Not just how to be homeless, which actually that's one of the things I learned is how to be homeless. But I also learned, what's best for me isn't what I want.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very beginning, I said, I don't want to do this. Honestly, I was honestly trying to think of a way to get out of it. Like, can I go, maybe, gag myself with a spoon and, throw up in the bathroom and be like, "Oh, sorry, I'm sick." Yep. I'm sick, guys. Sorry. You guys go have fun being homeless. I'm going to go back to my air-conditioned home and sleep all day. Well, no, that's not what God wanted me to do. And that's how it is with this pandemic is. I don't want to do it, but man, I've experienced a lot of spiritual growth directly because of all this.
Yeah.
And that was a hard thing to admit was, you know what? God has a plan that's probably way better for me than what I want.
Yep.
And that's all. And also with school is I had to take English again, and I really don't want. I hate English class. I hate it.
Even though it's his native tongue.
Yeah. But here's the thing I have to admit is I'm not a great essay writer, and honestly, God has me taking those English classes because I probably need the help.
Yeah.
That was something really hard to admit at the beginning of last semester. Was I'm here because I need the help.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we're about out of time.
One last thing I do
Yeah.
want to mention
Yeah.
is if you do have a legitimate anxiety problem, get help.
Yeah.
If you know us, if you know how to contact us, please, we'd love to sit down with you
Yeah.
and your parents, and we'd love to get you in touch with professional help.
Yeah.
And actually, don't feel alone because 40 million adults in the United States have some sort of diagnosed anxiety disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be first to admit
And
this.
I would
My family has issues with that.
I would say everybody goes through that season.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it may not be a lifetime, but it's a season, and everybody goes through a season like
Actually,
that.
a doctor I was talking to, he's a pediatrician, but he focuses on like adolescent care. And he says every single teenager he has ever worked with, the healthiest teenagers, the some unhealthiest teenagers, they all go through a phase where they don't want to wake up.
Yeah.
And so, especially since I'm gonna be honest, the majority of our audience is probably younger adolescents, with you being the middle school guy. But here's the thing: we're all gonna go through it. I'm gonna go through another phase where I have issues with anxiety. You're gonna go through another phase where anxiety is gonna be an issue.
Yep.
It all happens to us. But if you need that help, get it.
Yeah.
We would gladly sit down with you, get you help. School teachers will, trusted adults will. If someone who genuinely cares about you, we will get you help.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all the time we got, and we'll see you guys in a couple weeks with the next one. All right.
Yep.
See y'all.